Between the continued rise of pen and paper role-playing games and socialising over the internet rather than in person, it's no surprise more people are playing TTRPGs online than ever before. But playing a pen and paper role-playing game over the internet presents a unique set of challenges. Watching somebody roll a die or move a miniature on a map becomes a logistical issue the second the game hits the internet. And that's where platforms like Roll20 come in. If you didn't know already, Roll20 is an online platform designed to help you run tabletop role-playing games as seamlessly as if everyone were playing in the same room. There's an enormous catalogue of pre-built assets to help you design and build scenarios, dynamically move pieces around the board as the game continues, and implement rule sets from a wide variety of games. As you'll see from this video, you can build your own game from scratch or run pre-made scenarios, all while keeping track of what your players can see versus the information you as GM are privy to. It's just like having your own digital GM screen. So whether you're looking to start a fresh campaign, run a one-shot, or take an existing game into the digital realm, here are 4 reasons you should use Roll20 in your next tabletop role-playing session. This video is brought to you by Roll20. Number 1, it's easy to move your game online. If you've ever run a tabletop role-playing game before, you'll know accessibility is vitally important, and the same is true of Roll20. After all, if a tool makes a game harder to use rather than easier, is it really a tool at all? Thankfully, Roll20 makes this bit easy, with just a few hoops through which to jump before you get started. First, you need to make an account and create your first game. This ensures that everything you make will be nested under one handy umbrella, so you don't have to worry about scrambling around to find the right elements when it comes to actually running the game. This is especially handy if you're making multiple games set in different environments or even genres. Because nothing breaks the immersion on a Wild West game quite like an astronaut appearing out of nowhere and threatening to blow everybody out of the airlock. Building a game is the most involved step in the process, but the good news is that you can make it as straightforward or as complicated as you like. There are tons of assets available for you to use for free or purchase. These vary from details as small as the chairs in a tavern or a particular wall torch inside a dungeon, or they can be entire map packs ready-made for you and your players. So if you're looking to jump straight into the action, you can simply pick the pre-made stuff that's right for you and get on with it. Or you can slow things right down and meticulously craft something you can truly be proud of. Whichever path you choose, you'll be glad to know there's a whole host of tutorial content ready to help. The interactive map building tutorial gets you building custom environments even as you learn what the different bits of Roll20 do, for example. But there are also countless community guides out there to help you build exactly the kind of thing you're looking for. So while the toolbars and layer options might seem a little daunting at first, you're in good hands. The Roll20 community is not only very big, it's very active, so if you have a question, you can rest assured someone out there will have the answer. The most important lesson that community will teach you, in fact, is to use the stuff you like and leave the rest alone. With so many tools on offer, you might feel like you're missing out if you aren't using absolutely everything, but try and bear in mind that Roll20 is there to help you run your game in the way you want. If you just use it to keep track of where everyone is on a map in combat, that's plenty. If you want to go the whole 9 yards with integrated character sheets, dynamic lighting, fully interactive environments, and exhaustive rules reference, that's good too. Talking of character sheets, showing your players how to make and use one is thankfully very straightforward thanks to all of the interactive and game-specific templates. There's a whole host of supported games with ready-made templates on offer, so frankly, once you've got everybody signed in and you've got the basics of moving things about on screen, you're good to go. In other words, moving your game online involves as much or as little homework as you want to do, but either way, once you've got the basics down, you'll be set for life. It's kind of like riding a bike in that way, only a bike that makes dungeons. Number 2, customizing on the fly. Whether you're a player or a GM, Roll20 has a remarkable number of tools on offer. Far more than you'll ever need in any one given session or campaign, in fact. There will be tools you never end up using, some you find handy for the right scenario every now and then, and some so perfect you'll want to shout it from the rooftops. The point is, there's no right or wrong way to use Roll20, it's all about finding the tools that work for you and putting them together to build an experience that enhances your role-playing sessions without getting in the way. One of the most popular customization tools, for example, is bringing art into your game to make sure it looks the way the players expect it to. This extends from importing background art to create atmosphere, to player character portraits, and perhaps coolest of all, making custom enemy tokens so that when players look at a monster on a board, it looks exactly how it ought to. Bringing your own assets in is pretty straightforward, as you can see with me importing Fizz the Kenku Wizard from Dicebreaker here, but either way, it makes a huge difference. If you want to get really involved in customizing your game, however, there are tons of little macros that can really make a difference. For example, as a GM, you might use a macro to secretly bring up information on a player character, finding out what you need to know about your victim, about the character, without making the player suspicious. Similarly, you can use a macro to roll NPCs or enemies into the initiative order without alerting the players. This is perfect for a surprise twist on combat. Or, to help your players out, there are macros to remind everybody what the top 3 attack options are for non-player characters, making it easier to utilize NPCs in battle without having to pause the game and look up their stats. It's really up to you how heavily you customize your experience in Roll20, in other words, but if you really want to get into it, well, you can really get into it. And when I say customization on the fly, I really mean on the fly. As any DM worth their salt knows, tabletop role-playing games rarely go exactly according to plan. A conversation or combat might take an unexpected turn, for example, or the players might simply derail the adventure from the very beginning. Thankfully, once you've got to grips with tools like importing monster artwork for tokens or bringing in new maps, it's pretty straightforward to do these things on the fly. So even if the session isn't quite going the way you expected, you can still bring in all the necessary elements to keep things going without the session grinding to a halt. In other words, Roll20 can't stop your players from screwing up your plans, but it can make sure you're prepared for when they do so. Number 3. Not into building an adventure from scratch? Run a pre-made module. As exciting as it is to play a completely bespoke adventure, there's no denying that pre-written modules for pen and paper role-playing games are pretty handy. With a pre-crafted plot studded with enemies, NPCs, and environments, it frees everybody up to focus on the adventure at hand without worrying about doing extra prep. On Roll20, ready-made modules take on a life of their own. The NPCs, enemies, handouts, and macros are already created and fully implemented, meaning the modules are more than just digital copies of words on a page. Instead, they're fully realized Roll20 scenarios, so not only is all of the writing done on the GM's behalf, but all of the asset creation is too. You don't need to compromise when you're running something pre-made, in other words, so you get to save a whole bunch of preparation time and still enjoy a fully fledged experience. The 4th and final item on this list is dynamic lighting. Now, stick with me, I know that doesn't sound too exciting just yet, but trust me, it's one of Roll20's best features. One of the best things about pen and paper role-playing games is the sense of tension that comes from not knowing what's around the next corner. Creeping through a dungeon or a heavily wooded forest can provide a brilliant sense of dread as you slowly pick your way through the environment and discover it for yourselves. The problem with slapping down a pre-made map on a table, of course, is that it reveals pretty much everything there is to know about the space immediately. So if it's a high-tension environment, the characters will probably remain scared, but the players will get enough contextual information to know how big and how dangerous an encounter is likely to be. And that's where dynamic lighting comes in. By enabling dynamic lighting, players can only see as much as the characters can see. Kind of in the same way the fog of war mechanic hides and reveals part of the world map in video game. The dynamic lighting in Roll20 is super responsive, changing on the fly as pawns are moved around in order to illustrate exactly how much of each location is visible to the characters. As well as being a great tool for building dramatic tension and maintaining a sense of intrigue, dynamic lighting is super useful for establishing line of sight. Knowing whether or not you can see a creature in order to fire at or otherwise attack it is really important when you're role-playing, but doing that calculation can sometimes mean bringing the game to a standstill during what ought to be one of the smoothest, most exciting parts of play. Dynamic lighting makes it easy to see at a glance whether or not an enemy is in sight range and, therefore, whether or not it can be attacked, meaning you can keep your focus on the flow of combat rather than trying to determine whether the enemy has been spotted or not. Dynamic lighting is available to Roll20's Pro and Plus users, and it's well worth the investment, especially if you like to keep your players on edge. There are some exciting enhancements coming to the system in future too, so you don't want to miss out. And there you have it, friends, 4 reasons you should use Roll20 in your next role-playing session. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, there are loads more videos from Dicebreaker for you to check out. Some of them should be popping up on the screen now. Do like and subscribe so you don't miss anything else from us, but most importantly, thank you very much for watching and have a lovely day.